Welcome to the Team Engagement Podcast, where leaders of teams share their insights. Brought to you by Blue Sky Business Consulting. We discuss 5 questions in about 15 minutes. Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the Team Engagement Podcast, where leaders of teams share their insights. I'm very excited because our guest today comes all the way from London, England. This is Bianca Riemer, and she is an executive coach, and she is going to share some fantastic tidbits of wisdom for us in the leadership realm. So Bianca, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to join me on the podcast. Tell us a little bit about some of the things that you're working on as an executive coach, and then we'll get into the questions.
Yeah, absolutely, Shawn. So with all the excess data that we're all being bombarded with at the moment, with the internet, with social media, etc., there's increasing demand to get a really short message across convincingly. And that's what people like about my background in investment banking and stockbroking, where people gave me 2 minutes to convince them to buy a stock that I never heard about. So my clients appreciate that. And then the second thing that I started bringing in now that an increasing amount of executives actually really appreciate is the pranic healing angle, which has now been validated here in the UK by research at hospitals with an amazing 84% clinical response, clinical response rate for severe chronic pain and associated psychological disease. So I use it in executive coaching to help people relax and be great leaders.
Wow, I really like that. So yeah, we forget sometimes how much stress there is being in a leadership role, especially a senior leadership role. So
Mhm.
that's great that
Mhm.
you're able to help them just relax and then they can really lean into their best version of themselves. In fact, this is a
Absolutely.
great way to kind of get into our first question because we talk about the psychology of leadership and teams. So
Mhm.
Bianca, how can leaders create a psychologically safe environment?
Yes, that's such a great question because that's something that we've only really started hearing about a few years ago, right? And the
Right.
first thing to be aware of is that your team is a mirror of yourself as the leader. So the best first thing that you can do to create psychological safety is to model it and to have it within yourself. So you have to do the inner work. You have to feel safe within yourself. And also, that means getting rid of all of your grudges and get rid of all of your insecurities as well. So once you've done that, how do you interact with your team? That's also very important. You have to interact in your team in a way that they never feel judged by you. If you can invite comments and ideas without ever judging the quality of those comments and ideas, that's how then you can make it very safe for your team to continue contributing as well. So rather than say, hey, thanks for that idea, that's good, or that's not so good, just say thanks for that idea, anybody else.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, very important, especially if you're trying to generate ideas. You have to create that psychologically safe place, and it can't be done in the moment. And so I really like that you're telling our guests and our audience here that starts with you. You've got to really make sure that you're in a psychologically safe place with yourself, and then you can extend that to your team. I think that's fantastic. Great question and great answer. So thank you. All right, question number 2. Now, Bianca, I'm sure you've had a lot of people in your life that have influenced you for good. If you were to think of one person in particular, what is one word that you would use to describe that person?
I would use the word water.
Water. Oh,
Water. Yes, sorry, your pronunciation is water. And in the UK, we say water.
that's okay. That's a
Water.
great word though. Tell me a little bit more about why water is how you would describe that person.
Yeah, so it's based on a quote by him. So his name is Master Choa Kok Sui. He's a spiritual teacher, and he says to be successful, you have to flow like water. So
Mm.
what does water do when there's an obstacle? The water, you don't stop the water just flows around the obstacle. So to be successful, you have to flow like water. Don't let the obstacle stop you. You just flow around it.
Oh, I like that. That is an awesome way to interpret how we should respond to challenges. Just move right around them, get them solved. There we go. I like that. Okay, Bianca, how would you encourage leaders to foster a growth mindset, either in themselves or with their entire team?
Yes, that is such a great question. I recently started playing the piano and I was just constantly beating myself actually as I was hitting the wrong notes with my piano teacher sitting next to me. until I realized, wow, I'm really not being very kind to myself here. I'm just attacking myself whilst I'm learning this new skill. So, but that's obviously very hard to realize that you're holding yourself back in the moment. So, my first tip on how you can foster a growth mindset is the blameless post mortem.
Mm,
So, after the event, you replay the event in your mind. And first of all, you recall all the things that went well,
mm,
because that's easy for us to do, right? To remember, hey, I did this really good, and this went well, etc. And then that also opens up the possibility for you to be honest with yourself and say, yes, and this other thing I didn't do that very well. And but since you've just praised yourself for all of these other things, it's a little bit easier to not blame yourself for it, but to just say, okay, that didn't go very well. And then the most important thing is to replay the movie in your mind, but replay it during the things that you should have done. So in my case, playing the piano, I remember the wrong notes that I played, but then I imagine I'm playing the right notes, and then that creates the neural pathways in my brain to hopefully in the future be able to play the piece correctly. So in a corporate environment, you can do this by yourself, or you can also do this as a team. I would brief the team before the actual event that, hey, we're going to do a post-mortem afterwards, and I need you to pay attention to these two things. What's going well, what's not going so well, and then we do a blameless post-mortem afterwards. And I encourage all of your comments, whether positive or negative, and I will be grateful for everything. And then we're going to create a movie in our head on how we're going to do it better next time.
mm.
And it works brilliantly for my clients.
Oh, I like that. It's so important to have that growth mindset, and I like how you approach it. Let's start with the positive things that happen, and then let's add in, one or two things that maybe we can improve on, but use the energy of the positive things to lift up. And I am guilty of this myself, or I have whatever the situation was, I replay it in my mind, that movie in your mind that you described about. And I zero in on all the negative things. Okay, I want to prove this. I want to do that. I want to do that better. And, oh, it didn't go well. And we've got to change that mindset because that's a defeatist attitude, and we want to grow. And that's how we do it. I love that. I love how you shared that. That start with the positives, and then let that kind of lift up all those areas that you do want to improve on. Because there's always room for improvement, but
Mm.
we shouldn't approach it as I'm a failure type. It's more of just, hey, this has gone well. Let's make it better. I love that. Great response. All right, our final question here. Oh, I'm sorry. It's not our final question. We got to get to question number 4 here because this relates really well. Because we just got done talking about the growth mindset. So, Bianca, how can leaders, as they're trying to do all these important things, how can they make sure that they manage emotional wellness?
Mm. Yes, emotional well-being is so important at the moment with everything that's going on in the world, right? We're all overwhelmed
Right.
with negativities wherever you look. So it's really, really important for leaders to have their own support system inside and outside of work. People, things, activities that they can rely on that help them with balance their emotional well-being. So, what does that look like, a support system, right? If you're somebody who finds comfort in talking to other people, have some friends outside of work, but also some contacts inside of work to give you that support, some people you can talk to. If you're a person who likes to retreat and think stuff through by themselves, allocate some time on your calendar so that you can have some time for maybe a blameless postmortem with yourself, or maybe just meditating, right? Meditating, yoga, those things can really help some people. I had a guy at my previous job at Morgan Stanley who went to the gym and went for a good row, right? Whenever he felt a bit like he had to let go of some steam, he went to the gym. He came back with a bright red face and the biggest smile on his face, ready to roll. Let's have some more meetings. So it's about knowing what helps you individually as the unique person that you are, knowing what helps you find that emotional balance. And as a leader, of course, knowing making sure, that the people in your team have got the right appropriate emotional support for themselves, whatever that might look like. So it's very important to be aware that you're not managing yourself. The people that you manage are individuals, and they may find different things soothing or balancing their emotions than the things that you like. So it's important to have those conversations with people to make sure that they have their support system in place.
Oh, I really appreciate you mentioning that, Bianca, because that is a mistake that I see leaders making fairly frequently. They think, well, this is what works for me, therefore it must work for everybody else on my team.
Mhm.
And they forget, to your point, they forget that everybody's going to be a little bit different. And yeah, I might be the rower where I want to go row for half an hour and kind of get my focus back. But others might need to pull away and have some meditation time or some quiet time. And still others might need that emotional support group that you talked about. So great ideas on how to make sure that we're balancing and having really good emotional wellness and well-being because it's so important, especially in a leadership role. Excellent. Okay, now we're to the final question. Bianca, tell us a little bit about the first job that you've had.
Yeah. So my first job was as a teenager. One year I actually sacrificed about 60% of my school time to work in that job, and it was selling vegetables and fruit at my parents' market stalls,
Wow.
3 days per week. So when I was in that job, I started when I was 12, and I worked all the way until I was 20 before I went to college. And what was amazing in that job was that obviously I had the whole exposure to pricing, making the store look good, deciding on the prices on the individual items that we're selling, because it's all commodity stuff basically that we were
Right.
selling, right? But also the contact with the customers as well, because that was the main reason why people buy from you rather than buying the apples from the other
Right.
stand, is because
Right.
there's a personal relationship. And I learned that the customer is king, but not always. So there was once a customer, he bought eggs from us, and we let them pick their own eggs to make sure that they're all okay. They picked their own eggs, and he went away. He came back saying, "Your eggs are rubbish. They were all broken." So we said to him, "Oh, you picked your own eggs, right?" He said, "Yes, but they're all broken." We said, "Okay, we're sorry. Pick 6 more eggs." And, um, because, the customer's king.
Yeah.
And he then picked 6 eggs. Then he approached the other customers on the stall and said, "Do not buy from this stand. The stuff is rotten." That's when then one of my colleagues had a go at him and told him, "Don't come back."
Wow.
So
Well,
you have to set boundaries. This was in Germany. It's a very direct culture, let's put it like that. What I learned is that the customer is king, but if the customer does not treat you with the same respect that you treat the customer with, then you probably don't want them as a customer.
yeah, good point. Well, and it sounds like it created a foundation for you to understand about the customer and relationships and all those things because you went from selling the commodities and the fruit and whatnot to selling stocks. And so
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
that's a good span there of selling commodities, but really understanding the importance of having that relationship, a healthy relationship with a customer, because you're right, it can't always be that the customer is king and that they're right all the time. There are times when you need to say, "Okay, it's time for you to go elsewhere." So, well, Bianca, thank you so much for taking time and sharing of your wisdom, your expertise, and all of these great examples and how you've answered these questions. I really appreciate that. How can people find you?
Yes, you can find me on LinkedIn as Bianca Riemer, or on my website, it's biancariemer.com.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. And thanks to all of you who are joining us either by watching or listening to the podcast every week. We appreciate your support and encourage you to subscribe. I am your host, Shawn Richards, wishing you a great week. We'll see you. This is Shawn Richards with the Team Engagement Podcast, where leaders of teams share their insights. Be sure to follow or subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. And for more leadership tips, pick up your copy of Rapid Fire Leadership by going to rapidfireleadership.com, where you can also download free resources to help you in your leadership role. Thanks for joining us today. Have a great day.